call on Kate, who's going to talk to us about systems.
But not in person.
No, Kate's not speaking to us in person. We're going to actually watch her on the screen, but she will be available for questions.
Here we are, 2022, going digital at school. Prince Alfred College exists on Kaurna country, which encompasses the Adelaide Plains in South Australia, and we all acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from across Australia and the surrounding seas and recognise their continuing connection to land, water, culture and community. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and we honour your local community traditions of caring for archives and culture through country, through songs and stories. As well as the general challenges of any organisation going digital at school has many implications. I'm going to be sharing some aspects of my professional practice and talking about some of these things on the slide today. Prince Alfred College is a leading independent day and boarding school located on Digitisation Terrace in Kent Town, South Australia. Founded in 1869 by the Methodist Church and now affiliated with the Uniting Church in Australia, Prince Alfred College welcomes students and families of all faiths and backgrounds. Our motto is Fac Fortia et Patere, translated to do brave deeds and endure. The current enrolment is around 1,150 boys from reception to Year 12, with a further 250 boys and girls from ages 2 to 5 attending the college's Early Learning Centre, and we have about 150 boarders from Year 7 up. Our main campus is Kent Town on the edge of the CBD of Adelaide, and we also offer outdoor education programs for our students at our campuses in Adelaide Hills, the Murray River and the Yorke Peninsula. I've been a professional archivist since 2004, and I serve as the convener of the ASA South Australian Independent Schools Special Interest Group, and I'm a mentor to early and mid-career archivists. I'm a committee member of the SA branch of the ASA, and I began as a curatorial intern at the Art Gallery of South Australia and the South Australian Museum, and then moved to the role of archivist from 2004 to the State Library of South Australia. I love cultural collections, especially archival, and I'm passionate about unlocking the tangible cultural heritage of archives by making them more accessible through digital mediums. I began as college archivist at Prince Alfred College in 2019, which happened to have been our sesquicentenary year, which was a very busy year to begin in the role. The Prince Alfred College archives document a very rich history, which is brought to life through the archives. And the archives comprise 1,806 archival series records with approximately 1.3 linear kilometres of materials, including about the same linear metres of collections of objects and photographs, memorabilia, realia, uniform, etc., school ledgers, scorebooks, college publications, official records of the school, and a large and significant fine art and object collection. The college is now 153 years old and has developed a historically significant archive, which dates back to 1860 and includes a letter written by Prince Alfred himself, accepting an invitation to attend the college at his visit to South Australia and lay our college's foundation stone, which he did in 1869. The archive is a multi-formatted, including born digital and digitised collections. We also have a variety of film, cassette, VHS. We have architectural drawings, a variety of honour boards, and even a large wrought iron fountain by the UK Handicide Company, which is installed and fully operational. Our World War I Memorial Library is a dedicated college museum, and we have an official art gallery known as our Ashton Room, which houses a significant collection of artworks relating to South Australian artist and educator James Ashton. According to the Document and Guide Significance 2.0, the Collections Council of Australia have deemed the PAC archives to be a significant example of a school archives and fascinating as a record of the development of independent schools in South Australia. So as archivist, I feel obligated and motivated to improve the digital profile of the archives and change and improve the history of the archives management. Prior to 2019, the archives were managed by a trained archivist for around 15 years. However, during this period, there was not a great deal of scope or opportunity for the staff to consider an archive-wide digitisation plan. Fortunately, some vital records like enrolment registers and admission ledgers were captured in digital format to minimise retrieval and handling. However, there remains a large-scale project of digitisation ahead. Currently, there is no modern archival management system in place. The archives have been well described up to a point. Originally arranged and described by professional archivist Mr. Brian S. Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin served as Prince Alfred College archivist for 18 years, from 1986 to 2004, and is credited for establishing the archives as a professionally arranged and described archival record group involving detailed annotation of aspects of the college's history. The archives follow the Australian series system of arrangement and description and have a strong hierarchical arrangement design and structure. Bringing this arrangement to the 21st century is and will be a constant challenge. However, having it as a legacy system has been very reassuring as an archivist and a source from which to move forward in terms of decision-making and direction for the archives. Currently, only the archivist has access to these series lists. Since I talked about this at last year's conference, I have now been able to survey and inventory most of our collection. With the occasional surprise, I feel as though I am now more aware of our entire holdings, which is a comfort. This work now is to have the holdings accurately represented in a modern system. I'm now in the process of having my survey professionally reviewed by ArtLab Australia, who will conduct a preservation needs assessment and eventually provide a report. The report will provide leverage as evidence of what essential work is required for our materials based on a 1, 5 and 10-year preservation and conservation plan. I do have a good sense of which materials are at risk and I have prioritised these items in my workflow in the meantime. Another challenge is an increase in inquiries from other schools desperate for guidance on how to manage their archive. How did I know how to do all of this? Is it easy to identify at-risk materials? Well, my answer to this is yes. However, I do owe my ability to do this professionally and confidently based on my experience working with a variety of archives and archival formats. An experienced archivist will be able to recognise the significance of an individual item, but more essentially, we are also able to recognise patterns of arrangement and description based on what we are seeing across a group or groups of materials. Our archival training and practice helps us to identify how records have been managed and kept over time, and whether or not any context may have been lost in the life of that record or that record as a group. A school archive typically has been moved around physically and has multiple users and is likely has been victim to threats like disasters, environmental impacts, pest, neglect, things like that. Evidence of this will be told by the papers and the records themselves, but perhaps only to the trained eye. Experience working in archives will guide and determine how systems can be sourced and applied to help manage and maintain your collections. Today, school archives reflect the life of a school and by definition can be both very different and diverse between schools and can range from being either very well described and managed to having minimal inventory or description. In her recent open letter to the heads of independent schools, Nicola Laurent, on behalf of the ASA, said professional archivists have skills and experience in the arrangement and description of archives and records and specific knowledge relating to the preservation and conservation of collections. And ongoing commitment to the role of archivist is essential for meeting the long-term governance, compliance and efficiency requirements of independent schools. And we thank the ASA for its ongoing support of our profession. Another reference worth acknowledging is Dr. Janet Murray's research into archival university education trends, which is a recent paper, which ponders the professionalisation of archivists and the reducing ability to access tertiary studies in archives in Australia. According to these recently published findings, only 3 universities now offer archival education programs in Australia. Practical challenges lie in skilled professional archivists or the lack thereof, appointed to archival roles in schools, efficient support from departments like IT and the Executive Council, and implementation of adequate archival management systems which can successfully interoperate with school systems. Often the same or similar questions are sought by new and emerging archivists. There is great potential to amalgamate resources and provide advice for these young archivists, for new and emerging archivists working in the school sector and other sectors. Many schools have advanced knowledge and capture of their holdings, yet just as many have not adequately surveyed their collections or created an inventory. A professional archivist will know how to address and manage their collection, but it does take years to develop these survey skills. They will know how to interpret documentation like the ASA records retention and disposal schedules for independent schools and apply it to their collection and their collection development policy and collection planning. School archives house records which have value as authentic evidence of administrative, corporate, cultural and intellectual activity. Professional archivists in independent schools ensure these records are made, kept and used, with their work being vital for guaranteeing organisational efficiency and accountability. Archival management plans will assist in preparing or sustaining management of multiple formats in collections, including series and item level description, turned and born digital, and future formats. Without an initial register, it's practically impossible to design a digitisation plan, a preservation plan, or prepare an iterative cycle of treatment and management for the archive. May I now invite you to listen to some of my case studies. At last year's conference, I talked about 48 systems that I had been looking at for our archives. In the absence of a modern AMS, I was determined to find something that was scalable and that I could implement quickly and efficiently. After much consideration, I started thinking about what we already had in use at the school, but outside of the archives. The senior school librarian had mentioned that she was about to start looking at replacing the Cersei Dynex system for her senior school library. We worked together with our IT executive and the prep school librarian and organised to invite some providers to present demos. I was quietly confident that I might be able to express our archival data within a library management system. I had spent 15 years doing exactly this in my previous role at the State Library of South Australia. The challenge was to create mapping tables which could carry our archival data from FileMaker Pro to a new LMS. This is an example of how the data appears to the user in FileMaker Pro. You may recognise some of the fields. It is a frustratingly limited system with only a one-word search option in each field. I needed to do something radical. I exported the entire database to PDF, which has made searching much more successful, but that was only ever going to be an interim solution. I needed to get all of this data into a scalable AMS. I created my desired template, which was based in ISADG and inclusive of all of the fields I wanted, and also a few extra, which I hope will assist in creating lists for nominated workflows. I then exported the data from FileMaker Pro into Excel. Once I started doing this, I discovered 4 other databases within the FileMaker Pro archive that were not obvious from the user interface in the version of FileMaker Pro, which I had access to, which included an old accession register for archival donors, which was an amazing discovery. I was mind blown by that. And it's more data upon data, but I was grateful to find it. I will retain the FileMaker Pro files as a legacy system until I have thoroughly tested and am confident with the new LMS. I've mapped the current data from Excel to a table of fields which best match MARC fields. There are about 3,600 series, including accession records, and thousands of items within those series hierarchies. If you can see it in the top row, the top row expresses MARC fields going across left to right, and that is the fields used by libraries in cataloguing. And the second row expresses the closest value I could match or map from the FileMaker Pro data. I have also included my desired MARC fields towards the right-hand side end that I want to add to my school archives data and template, which will help me create lists and manage my archive and provide better searching. I'm now working on a template for user access, which will express the fields how I want them to be discovered and in the right order. And I will be able to limit access to suppress fields. This is an example of the Library of Congress of the user interface. It's not exactly how ours will look, but it just gives you an idea. There will be many benefits when we go live, and one of the simplest examples I use when I'm talking to executive and our council and IT is just simple searching. For example, a student could perform a search on World War I and get a return of all archival items tagged with World War I in descriptive fields and subject headings, but they will also get a list of any publications available in our school libraries. We are able to design the interface to suit senior school students and have a separate, easy-to-use interface for our prep school as well. Sounds simple, but this has not been possible prior for archival materials. And the results of all of this work are that our archival collections will eventually open up dramatically, and I can prioritise workflows with a much more sophisticated system, especially for digitisation, and that I will be able to train staff and volunteers that can help me with data entry. 856 is a versatile field and can be embellished with delimiters to refine the data and display it very succinctly. For example, you can include instructions for users in the interface as well as separate sections of data into lists. Providing access to temporary low-risk files will minimise the need to repeatedly access preservation and access files from the server and will protect our digital assets. It will also provide a platform for community-created content to enhance the descriptions of the records. Many of our old scholars are able to identify faces and photographs or places and locations which may not have been identified in the raw material. Users will also be able to search for and download digital files, including photographs and podcast oral histories. For example, a student could perform a search on World War I and get a return of all archival items. As I mentioned, eventually copy orders for photographs and other items can be managed through the system by providing the 856 link in the template, which will take a user to temporary low-resolution files sourced from a digital object management system or a DAMS. It will also provide a platform for community-created content, as I mentioned before. Digitisation may provide access and may be a pathway to a preservation strategy. However, mere digitisation alone is not a preservation strategy. You will need to be able to articulate and discuss with your IT department and your executive a well-managed cyclical process to ensure access to your materials over time. I recommend that this is detailed in your archival policy and your organisational policy. The systems you are using will need to reflect your commitment to or your awareness of the need for a preservation strategy. For example, as I'm currently implementing my new AMS, I am making sure the system has the capability to add timing cycles to specified groups of records, which will mean I can review how these selections are looking over certain periods of time. And without a digital preservation system as such, it is essential to prepare and monitor at-risk records on a cyclical basis to guarantee best practice. Leaving a legacy of this for the next archivist or for your team will ensure fragile, obsolete and born fragile items have been acknowledged and are on the radar for preservation. You need to be doing this now as a general practice in the archives. It is not a particularly radical idea at this stage. Very briefly, preferred design patterns in digital preservation are emerging, and generally understanding the associated flows of information is becoming clearer as more digitised material is preserved. This way of describing the overall flow of archival information can be visualised via this simple diagram. Standards like the Open Archival Information System, or OAIS, Open Reference Model, can provide useful high-level frameworks. However, they cannot provide concrete guidance when it comes to how to actually implement a digital preservation program. Keeping aware of global research into effective workflows for preparedness is essential. There are opportunities to promote archival collections through digital platforms, even when a digital preservation plan or even an AMS is out of reach. Being able to interweave archives in the curriculum of a school will attract support from executive and council and will ensure archives are discoverable for current and future generations. What is your Old Scholars Network like? Invite them to be involved with your archives collections. Reconnect them to their experience of school life and ask them to contribute to your projects or even to your vision for what you want to do with your collections. Respectfully inquire if they would like to support your projects and promote your exhibitions. Expect that old scholars may often offer their time for volunteer projects. Anticipate projects that they will enjoy and that will assist your workflows. Developing your volunteer base does take a lot of work, so be prepared for that. Based upon some of our incredible archival content in our published history books, the Prince Alfred College History Wall was unveiled earlier this year. The content in these wonderful publications was curated into a timeline or a potted history of the college. The installation is a 10 by 3 metre piece, generously funded by our Old Scholars Association. I specifically chose images and content which was unusual and rarely seen, and I also wanted to steer away from well-known portraits and individual images. The result is a strongly pictorial history of our college depicting our 154 years across 7 panels, one large image of our main building across the top, and 55 individual images of school life underneath. Eventually, our published history is now brought to life and extended to our students and community in this piece. Boys from Year 7 to Year 12 walk past this site at every lesson change, and it is accessible to all students and available after hours. Users can simply walk past the installation or stop and read the captions describing the content of the images. The surface is intentionally reflective to allow viewers to have a sense of placing themselves within the history of the school, further defining a sense of identity within the life of the school. For the archivist, this project was also a very good exercise in reviewing this archival content to ensure it's well managed and accessible into the future. Upon retirement of a headmaster, we traditionally have a portrait commissioned for our headmaster's portrait gallery. The portraits are installed in ascending order of each headmaster's term. The location is the stairwell of our main building, and the artists include Australian War artist and Archibald Prize winner Sir Ivor Heal, Robert and Searing Hannaford, and Peter Serwin. As a tribute to our recently retired headmaster Bradley Fenner, and as part of the installation of his portrait, our student intern instigated a review of the portrait gallery, and this has resulted in an improvement to the interpretive content of the displays. And we have now created an exhibition booklet, including the subject of the painting, headmastership and the legacy of the headmaster, historical events in that tenure, and artist biographies. And this information will all be published on our website as well. So I can recommend to you these things, and with your to work with your executive and your council and add archives to your school strategic plan is a very good way of going forward. Connect with the ASA and familiarise yourselves with the resources available through membership, including scholarly articles and research papers published via the website. Join your local ASA Independent Schools Special Interest Group and be active. Attend the meetings and the professional development training sessions that become available. Actively seek and attain qualifications in archives and record keeping, archival management and preservation, if not already qualified, and maintain your knowledge. Upskill yourselves and your team about digital preservation and digitisation techniques, and consider how you will manage these workflows. Plan your workflows around essential conservation and preservation of your vital records, and try to keep up with what I call your grunt work, set aside regular time slots for the accessioning, processing and labelling of your collections. May I thank the ASA and Nicola Laurent for having me at the conference today. My fellow panellists Ross Malone and Paul Mashura, and thank you Jenny Pearce for moderating. May I acknowledge the ASA and the branches and the SIGs, and many thanks to our school and our supportive community. Thank you.
Okay, have we got any questions? We've been given a lot to think about and a lot to put in process, and probably for some of us it's a little daunting. Yep.
Hi, I'm Louise. I'm really interested in, so from outside the school archives community, things look really complex. Like, it's quite interesting to get a sense of the responsibility you shoulder. So I'm a parent of a 12-year-old in an independent school, and I know their record keeping consists of a shed. And I teach students at Charles Sturt, and I teach lots of teacher librarians who are landed with the job of looking after the archives, and they enrol in the archive subjects. And it's really interesting because this is a foreign landscape to some of them, quite deeply foreign. So one of my questions to you is, some of the detail that Kate and Paul have presented is what's your value proposition? Like your community, for those of us from the outside, it's quite hard to understand the place of records and archives. You look so handsomely resourced. So, and it's like, you know, like I'm sure council archivists amongst us would be going, oh my God, they can like make a display and have a museum.
Yeah.
It seems like wealthy from the outside. And I'm sure that's a kind of cultural phenomenon that you have to manage a lot, is you're kind of in the haves, where there's other parts of the archive community who are in the have-nots. So I'm just wondering if I can ask that rather awkward question, you know, because I'm sure the conversation looks different inside your community than outside it.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that. Thanks, Louise. And it's interesting you say I had a little bit of experience in teaching the archival management course in Adelaide myself, so I understand that side of it. But I think what we do as archivists is we're essentially also selling the school. So we're trying to historicise and make the school look particularly valued and based in heritage. But also for that reason, if we're lucky enough to have a support from executive, we are hopefully supported to do some of the programming. But having said that, I have a pretty small budget, but I'm just starting to lay the foundation of what I need to do, and then I'm going to be able to just use some documentation to leverage, we need this amount of money, or we need this amount of money to do this and that. But it's a bit of smoke and mirrors, I think. I think Paul's examples of his exhibition spaces are really fantastic. Mine are really not, they haven't really been extended since I've been in the role, because I've been building the role. I haven't really had time to do anything with the exhibition spaces except that new piece that I showed, which was a bit of a quick fix actually. So at the same time, it meant that we could look at the digitisation process and what needs to be done for digitisation. But I'm not sure if that's answering that properly. Do you want to add, Paul? Or
just to give an example, my budget's also fairly small too. There are schools like ours that I have seen. I visited a lot of schools and seen what they've got. There was one school where its entire archives were things stored on the floor in the corner of one room. There's another one where student records and what comprises or stands for the entire archives is stored in one room about 8 feet by 8 feet. So they do all vary in terms of resourcing that we get. The smoke and mirrors comment's very apt. We do need to make things look a lot better than perhaps they are, but a very big part of it is the past students of the school are attracted to it. There's a lot of researchers that come to it. A lot of it's not as neat and as nice as we like, but it's a gradual process. In the case of my facilities, I spoke about the 2 old houses. I still have the 2 houses, but they're being stuck together. I've got a new compactus area built on the back. A lot of fundraising was done from the old boys to make that possible.
And I'll very briefly say, from the records point of view, the value proposition has to be sold to the school. Protective record keeping is the way to sell it to the school, and risk management. And my school, that has caused them, although we're a low-risk school, we have no real reason to do this. It's a matter of planning and future-proofing. It's just the way they see the business environment for non-government schools. So it's a business decision. You sell it as such, and they will be investing more time and more resources into this next year. So I was able to successfully put that to them, and that is a major part of the role of the school archivist, with what Paul and Kate do, and with the focus of my work that I've delivered today. You must sell it to your school.
And you're currently advocating within the school for the archive as well. You kind of You're the gatekeeper, the custodian, the advocate, you're everything. Otherwise, it really will just be just a dusty shed. And in my case, our storage is at literally capacity with, potentially 50, 100 years more of records being kept over time. I really have nowhere to put anything. So I'm currently sort of lobbying for more storage, both digital and, virtual.
So it looks good, Louise, but there's a lot of work behind it.
But it's
And we present it well, and every school archivist would know what we mean.
One more question, and that's we're going to have to call it quits.
I just have a quick question, or it's actually a statement in response to that question as well. One of our jobs is actually to document the history of education in Australia, and I really like the fact that Paul had that the student work, and I think that's one of our jobs, and how children play and played over the years, and I think that's something that is probably not valued as much, but I think in terms of actually, it's something we're looking at my school, is actually looking at the students' work over time, over, in your case, 150 years. I mean, it is a really valuable asset to education, I do believe.
It's good, and at the moment it's excellent to be able to do things like we made a COVID-19 digital time capsule, which captures that, exactly what you say, but in the moment of COVID-19 to be able to look back on it.
Okay, well, I'd like you to thank our three speakers. Thank you to Rose, Kate and Paul. Pass them along.